How body recomposition completely changed my life in 90 days. I want to be honest with you up front about the title of this video. My life changed in 90 days. The weight, the full 40 pounds, that took about 6 months. And those are not the same promise. I'm naming it now because I think the difference between those two things is actually the most important thing I can teach you about body recomposition. Because if you're using the scale as the only measure of whether something is working, you've probably quit things that were actually working. And I quit a lot of things that were working for many years. So here's what I learned. Body recomposition isn't a 90-day program. It's a shift in how your body and your brain relate to movement and to food. And that shift, that's the thing that can happen in 90 days. The physical change follows it, it doesn't lead it. And in this video, I'm going to break down for you the two reasons most women never get there and what I did differently that finally made it stick. So before we get into the two reasons, let me name what body recomposition actually requires because the word gets thrown around quite a bit. To recomp your body, you need consistent resistance training, enough protein to build and maintain muscle, and a caloric deficit that is sustainable that your body will do both at the same time lose fat and build muscle. That really is it. That's the logistics layer. We can do more on that if you'd like. And if you've been doing this for any amount of time, you probably already knew this. You've Googled it, you've even started it. So the question is not what body recomposition requires. The question is why knowing exactly what to do has not been enough to make it stick. And that's what this next 10-ish minutes is about. All or none thinking. This is the one that got me for many, many years before I understood what was actually happening to me. Here's exactly how the cycle works. You decide Monday's the day, you start strong. Tuesday, Wednesday, you're doing it. Then by Thursday, something happens. You miss a workout or you eat something that wasn't on plan. And then something shifts, not in your body, but in your brain. The day feels ruined. So you figure, I'll start fresh Monday, except Monday becomes next Monday. And then by the time next Monday rolls around, you've convinced yourself the whole thing wasn't working anyway and that it was a complete waste. That's not a discipline problem. That's a cognitive pattern called all or none thinking. And it's one of the most well documented barriers to behavior change of any kind in clinical psychology. What it's doing is applying a pass fail framework to something that is inherently kind of on a spectrum. Fitness progress is not binary. A missed workout followed by a workout is still progress. A missed workout followed by giving up entirely is actually a completely different outcome. And your brain, in that moment of it's ruined, is choosing option two. Not because you're weak, but because that binary framing made option two feel very logical. And I want you to hear that again. It felt logical because the framing was wrong, not identity mismatch. The second one is quieter, and it took me a lot longer to name it. And I would call that like the identity mismatch. Here's what that looked like for me. I would do a program, I'd even finish a program sometimes, but I never felt like a fit person. I felt like somebody doing a fitness program or going through the motions. And that gap matters more than it sounds like it would. Because when life got hard, when I was tired, when I was stressed, when I had a week, that just fell apart. Fit people don't quit, they modify. They do a 15-minute workout instead of 45 minutes. Or they go for a walk. They do something because movement is just what they do. But if your internal identity is someone doing a fitness program, then when the program feels impossible, you stop because you were never the person. You were just doing the thing. Think about how you talk to yourself about this. When you skip a workout, is the story I missed today, or is it I'm someone who can't stick to things? That second story isn't about the workout. That's an identity statement, and you cannot outdiscipline an identity that is working against you. Body recomposition, the actual shift in your muscle to fat ratio, requires consistency over time, not absolute perfection, consistency. And consistency is only possible when the identity says, this is just what I do, not this is what I'm trying to do. So here's where I could tell you to just believe in yourself and send you off. But I'm not going to do that because that's not always super useful. And you've also probably already heard it. So, what I'm going to do is tell you what actually changed specifically because the shift wasn't motivational, it was structural. So, one of the first things I changed is what I'm calling minimum viable rep. I stopped using a workout program as the unit of commitment and I started using one set or a couple of sets. One set or anything counted, not a full workout, as proof that I showed up. Some days that one set turned into an entire hour, and some days it literally just was the one set and then I went to fold laundry. But both counted. What this did psychologically is it removed that binary. There was no ruined day anymore. There was only I showed up in some form or not. And that question had a much easier answer. The second thing, and this one kind of surprised me, is I stopped trying to become a gym person and I started becoming a workout at home person on purpose. And that kind of sounds small, but that was a full identity rewrite for me. I stopped treating the home gym aspect as a consolation prize for when I couldn't get to the real gym. I started treating it as my actual gym. And I've been training at home for 6 years now, as you can probably tell. I know exactly what works, what's overhyped, and what my body actually responds to. And that's not a limitation. I kind of find that as an expertise. And so when I started narrating in that way internally, not out loud, I stopped feeling like I was doing like the budget version of fitness. I was building something specific for my life, my schedule, my body. And that's not a compromise. That's a choice. And the third thing I did is I made peace with the 6 month timeline, not the 90-day one. The 90-day was when I really started fully feeling different. More energy, clothes fitting differently, waking up without dreading movement. The scale took longer. It just does. And I had to decide that those 90 days of changes were enough to keep me going, even when the scale was slow or not moving at all. Because the reality is, in body recomp, the scale may not change because you're sort of exchanging muscle with fat. And most women quit in month 2 or 3 because the scale hasn't moved in the way they expected. But you're sleeping better, you're moving more consistently, and your relationship with food being less chaotic is part of your body recomp. That is the body recomposition. The scale is the one data point that moves much more slowly, but it's also not the whole picture. So here's what it actually did for me and what I think you can realistically expect. I lost 40 pounds over 6 months. I kept it off, but the number I actually care about is more than the 40 pounds. It's that I have not quit. I haven't had another I quit moment, not a single one. Not because I'm more disciplined necessarily than I was before, but because the framework I'm living inside makes quitting feel illogical. The identity mismatch got repaired. The all or none thinking got interrupted, and the minimum viable rep meant that there was no such thing as a ruined day. And I also want to tell you where I'm coming from. I'm a licensed counselor by trade, and the things that I've been describing, all around thinking, identity behavior loops, that's a clinical behavioral psychology and science. And I know it because I learned it in the clinical context, and then I applied it to my own body, which I know probably sounds kind of weird, but it is what it is. But that combination is why I talk about fitness in the way that I do on the channel because I can see it in that way. I am under 5 feet tall. I'm a mom in my 30s. I am not a personal trainer. I'm someone with clinical training in a behavior change who has personally tested what works for her body that the mainstream fitness doesn't always tell you about. And that specifically matters because you might be sitting here in the same body type, the same schedule, the same history of quitting, and the mechanisms, they still apply to you, not just to me. So here's what I want you to actually do with this, not a 10-step list, one thing. Define your minimum viable rep this week. Not your ideal workout, the smallest version of showing up that you will commit to on your worst week. Maybe it's one set, maybe it's putting your workout clothes and standing in the space for 2 minutes. Maybe it's a 10-minute walk. That's your floor, not your ceiling. And when you hit that floor, do not apologize for it. Do not tell yourself you should have done more. You showed up. That's the rep for now. Because here's what body recomposition actually requires it requires you to still be in the game in 3 months when most people have quit. The only way you're still in the game in 3 months is if the game you designed is for your real life and not your ideal life. Your ideal life shows up 5 days a week for 45 minutes. Your real life shows up when it can for as long as it can. The minimum viable rep is what makes sure that when we can, never becomes never. So, on the identity side, I want you to try this once, not as an affirmation, as a description. When someone asks if you work out, not I've been attempting to, just yeah, I do home workouts. Watch what that does to you in the next week because the small statement is the beginning of identity repair. And the identity repair is what makes the 90-day shift possible before your scale catches up. So if this landed for you or you recognize yourself in your all or none loop or identity story, the next video to go watch is this one here. This is all about like a body recomp and if I wanted to lose weight in, some form or fashion. And I go through an exact blueprint with protein targets and things like that so that you can set it up for yourself. I'll link it here. And watch that one first. And then go here if you want something else that's more workout focused and figuring out what workouts might work for those body recomposition goals. If you've been doing home workouts and feeling like you're in the backup plan version of fitness, you're in the right place. This channel was actually built for you. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, friends.